45, but now the news.
Three dead, 4 missing in Scotland's worst blizzards of the decade. Britain's first test tube triplets, it's 2 boys and a girl. Fighter plane launches America's anti-satellite missile into space. 300 passengers get off the Sydney ferry just in time. Good evening. 3 climbers, 2 of them brothers, have died in the worst blizzards in Scotland this decade. Other climbers are still out in the hills tonight, and there's concern about one group with more heavy snow forecast. The 3 dead climbers were caught in hurricane-force winds on Corrie and Lochan in the Cairngorms. They died of exposure one by one as they tried to find their way down to a road. The 4th member of the party, Mr. Derek Kilpatrick, was found crawling and incoherent near the Glenmore Lodge Outdoor Activity Centre. The dead, all from Heriot Watt University Mountaineering Club, were Graham Bell, aged 21, and his 19-year-old brother Keith from Limekilns in Fife, and Kieran and Connor from Glasgow.
This Sea King crew returned tonight after 9 hours in blizzard conditions. Back in the ops room, the 5 told of flying 10 feet above the ground, at one stage under power lines because visibility was so poor. Their gruesome task today was to recover the bodies of the 3 climbers who died from exposure at Glenmore.
With the assistance of the ground forces, the mountain rescue teams, we located 2 of the bodies fairly swiftly and picked them off the mountain and took them to Inverness Hospital police station. While we were there, the mountain rescue team found the 3rd body and they took him away. The unfortunate thing of the whole story was, I think, that they were within a half a mile of habitation and they'd obviously stopped and frozen overnight. Last night, winds were up to 100 miles an hour, and they must have been very piercing, very cold, and the energy slowly drained from them because they'd been out since Friday night.
I understand from the mountain rescue team that were with us that they'd actually bivouacked and put up a tent and everything, and just slowly but surely everything they had blown from around their ears, and they tried to walk back and just dropped off on the way, each one of them.
The emergency is not over. 4 mountaineers are now missing near Aviemore, and more snow is forecast tonight. Both civilian and Sea King rescue crews will be out from first light tomorrow. Michael Macmillan, ITN, in Scotland.
The snow reached London and the home counties for the first time this winter, but it was much worse in the north, and Scotland was paralysed. Navy, Air Force and civilian helicopters have been flying rescue missions all day. 2,000 motorists were trapped by snowdrifts up to 20 feet deep at Glen Shee, more than 100, including a 6-week-old girl at the Dromocta Pass, others at the Bridge of Orchy and at Legg in Sutherland. A pregnant woman was flown to hospital in Aberdeen from an isolated farm 30 miles inland and had her baby boy safely. And 4 trains were trapped, one at Achnasheen, others between Inverness and Aberdeen, between Inverness and Wick, and at Tyndrum. A woman passenger who had a heart complaint died after she was taken off that train.
2,000 skiers are now heading home after spending a freezing night huddled in cars, buses and every form of accommodation at Glen Shee. Snow ploughs and blowers faced near impossible conditions as roads filled in with drifting snow almost as quickly as it was being cleared. Food for the stranded skiers ran out at 4 a.m. and RAF helicopters were called in to drop supplies to provide sustenance for hundreds of motorists who'd braved 100-mile-an-hour winds and sub-zero temperatures.
The wind was so strong last night, we were right at the front of the queue. The wind was so strong we couldn't really get out of the car. So there was no great communication with the rest of the people till this morning.
We ran our engine every hour for 10 minutes just at the start of the hour just to keep the car warm. But it did get very cold and very, very difficult. No food, of course, because we'd eaten all at lunchtimes. And that basically is what it was like.
But the conditions proved too much for 8 of the stranded skiers. They were airlifted to hospital in Dundee, where 3 are still detained. And a helicopter was used to take 29 men off an oil rig which ran aground at Peterhead. A further 22 men are still on board the rig, which is stuck fast 100 yards from the beach. Rescue services are stretched to the limit, coping with the worst storm that Scotland has experienced in recent years. Road clearing crews are working round the clock in a bid to keep major routes open. But most roads in the north and northeast are blocked, and those that are open are not advised.
Britain's first test tube baby triplets have been born in London, and doctors say they're doing very well. The professor who delivered them described the two boys and a girl as fabulous. We have the first pictures.
The babies were born yesterday, 5 weeks early. They weigh between 4 pounds 5 ounces and 5 pounds 10 ounces, and all three of them are well enough to have been removed from their incubators. The mother, who doesn't want to be named, has been infertile for 10 years, and 2 previous attempts at test tube fertilisation had failed. But yesterday, the 35-year-old woman from London gave birth to a girl and 2 boys, while Dad recorded the delivery on his home video camera. It seems test tube pregnancies often lead to multiple births, but Mum is very special in another way too.
She appears to be rather unique in the sense that, from a medical point of view, in that the triplets appear to consist of twin boys, but appear to be identical twins, and a single girl. And of course, as you would expect, the girl came first and was the heaviest birth weight baby too.
So this evening you are indeed a very proud man, I should imagine.
Well, we're very happy for the mother, put it that way. We're proud for the team, but we're even more happy for the mother.
So far, the parents haven't been able to agree on 3 names. John Underwood, ITN, at the Portland Hospital.
The United States and Russia are to resume talks on reducing conventional forces in Europe on March the 16th. The American Secretary of State, Mr. George Shultz, says both sides had agreed to new talks in Vienna when they met in Stockholm last week. But Mr. Shultz said the Russians have shown no willingness to reopen negotiations on either medium or long-range nuclear missiles. The Labour leader, Neil Kinnock, said today he might not be able to keep his election pledge that unemployment would come down to 1 million under a Labour government. He said on ITV's Weekend World that by the next election, so many would be out of work that Labour's measures might only bring the figure down to 2 million. The United States has test-fired into space its first anti-satellite missile. The 18-foot-long unarmed missile was launched from a fighter plane. The test, which was carried out in a top-secret operation, has been strongly criticized in America. A former U.S. arms negotiator called it the first step to a war in space.
Out in the California desert at Edwards Air Force Base, work on the missile had been intensified since President Reagan's speech last March, committing America to developing the capacity for anti-satellite warfare. The F-15 fighter plane took off from the long desert airstrip and climbed to 50,000 feet with the relatively small missile slung under its belly. The actual firing occurred above the new military space complex being built here at Vandenberg in California. £6,000 million is being spent this year on the drive for military development in space. The missile's test represents the first tangible step in the program. Because of congressional reservations, the Air Force monitors in Colorado plotted a course which did not involve a target. The missile was merely directed at a point in space. No one will say whether it was a success. But if, as most sources here believe, it was, then America has now overhauled the crude land-launched Soviet anti-satellite missile, which the Russians have fired some 20 times with mixed results. John Snow, ITN, Washington.
The 6 East Germans who sought political asylum in the United States Embassy in East Berlin have arrived in the west of the city. The embassy said tonight that the 6 had been driven to West Berlin following negotiations with their East German lawyer. The former Black Panther leader, Stokely Carmichael, was turned away when he arrived at Heathrow Airport today to start a speaking tour. He was banned by the Home Secretary, Leon Britton, who said the visit would not be conducive to the public good. Carmichael, now known as Kwame Ture, caused controversy during a visit here last year when he backed street riots to overthrow the government. In Northern Ireland, armed police guarded worshippers at the Gospel Hall in Darkley, South Armagh today at the first Sunday service since gunmen killed 3 church elders there 2 months ago.
From early morning, armed police stood guard outside Darkley Church Hall where the atrocity took place. Others took cover in the hillside around the isolated building. Security here is now an important issue. The official unionists have withdrawn from the Northern Ireland Assembly as a result of the Darkley killings. The congregation at this morning's service, there will be no more evening meetings until the nights get lighter, included families of the 3 dead men. Unionist MP James Nicholson also joined in the singing and memories of that November night, which were captured on this dramatic recording.
Well, my feelings towards the people that did it, that God will forgive them if they seek it. And if they don't seek it, they're going to be damned.
But far from forgiveness, the Catholic Reaction Force, who claimed responsibility for the attack on these people, have threatened to shock the whole of Europe with their next operation. The churchgoers of Darkley hope and pray it will never happen. Terry Lloyd, ITN, South Armagh.
In South Africa, 18 tribal chiefs and witch doctors have been accused of murder and attempted murder after 6 people were burned alive at the stake, apparently because they were believed to be possessed by demons. The witch doctors made the diagnosis after several villages in northern Transvaal were struck by lightning. In tomorrow's News at 1, there's a full report on the case. And finally, in Australia, 300 people have been evacuated from a ferry boat which sank after a race in Sydney Harbour. Thousands of passengers crowded onto the boats as the annual Sydney Ferrython got underway. But by the halfway point, the wash thrown up by the faster competitors was creating problems for the older vessels, among them the Caribbean. She finished third, but after crossing the finishing line, she was steered to the quayside as it became obvious she was in difficulties.
Because of all the wash of all the boats in the harbour, there was a lot of water coming aboard, and it just kept coming. It was up to the seats, 18 inches high almost, at the front of the boat.
Passengers were still being taken off as she started to go down. And minutes after the last person was safe, the ferry sank in 30 feet of water. And that's the news this Sunday evening. From all of us here at ITN, a very good night to you.
Good morning. I'm here to bring you the news on TV AM.
From Monday, Gordon Honeycomb, Britain's favourite newsreader, is back to bring you the news over breakfast. Tune in to Gordon on every hour and half hour on TV AM. Plus, straight after the news at 7 and 8, Jeremy Beadle tells you about the fun things that happened on that day through history. And next week sees the Great Australia Day run. Chris Tarrant joins the race to get a can of lager from Australia to Britain in record time. Will he win? Will he make it at all? See what's happening where it's happening every morning on TV AM.
And the weather. Clear skies for a while tonight will give a frost with icy patches on roads as the temperature falls to -3 degrees. Cloud will soon increase with snow reaching western counties in the earlier hours and spreading quickly across the whole of the region. It will die out during the day and become somewhat brighter, but the temperature will only reach 2 degrees. The light or moderate westerly wind will become southeasterly for a while overnight. And that's the weather forecast.